You are listening to the Uninformed States of America podcast with your host, Mike Riley, here on the Young Angels Network. Follow us by going to youngangelsnetwork.org, MikeRileyNow.com, and the USAPodcast.com. All right now. Yeah, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everything in between that, of course, to the Uninformed States of America podcast, right here on the Young Angels Network. Welcome to the show, y'all. Yeah, Marasaka. That right there is for you, for all you beautiful people out there in podcast land. Welcome to the USA Podcast on the Young Angels Network. I'm your host, of course, Mr. Michael Riley. Welcome to the show. Today is Wednesday, December 16th of 2020. It is our last show of the year 2020, y'all. We have had an incredible journey of a year, and we're going to get into all that, of course, on tonight's show. In the second segment, we're going to be doing our annual Christmas special, and I'm going to be giving you guys a Christmas story about Jude Wadinsky's two Santa Claus theory. And then also, too, in the third segment, in the open mic segment, you're going to want to stick around for that, because I'm going to be kind of giving you guys the skinny on E Pluribus Unum, if I said that right, about how we should all be in this together, and give you my final thoughts for 2020. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But before we do that, make sure that you subscribe. I almost forgot that part. If this is your first time listening to this show, please make sure you hit that subscribe button on however you listen to podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you can hear me on Amazon Podcasts. Just ask Alexa to play the Uninformed States of America podcast. Do all that cool stuff, and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you download the app. Tell all your friends about it. Sign up for the information click on MikeRileyNow.com and all that cool stuff. Okay, now I've been promising you guys somebody from Georgia for the last couple of weeks. I've been promising you that I was going to bring you in somebody from Georgia who can talk about these elections down there. Everybody knows about the big Senate runoff elections that are going with John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock going up against David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Everybody knows about that. All eyes are on Georgia. But there's another race down in Georgia, which is equally important. It's the race for Public Service Commissioner. This is a big one. And the gentleman who's running in that race, his name is Daniel Blackman. And I spoke to him earlier this week about his race, and I want you guys to listen to it. I call this the Blue Peach Movement. It's a movement to turn the peaches blue out there in Georgia. And I came up with the name after I interviewed him, of course, so I didn't mention it in the interview, but whatever. But y'all take a listen to Daniel Blackman right here. You can check him out at danielblackmanforgeorgia.com. Listen up. All right, and welcome everyone to the USA Podcast. So I have a very special guest on the line with us today. This gentleman is actually running for Public Service Commissioner in Georgia's 4th District. So we're going to talk to him about all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, Mr. Daniel Blackman. Daniel, are you there?
I'm here, man.
Hey.
I'm here. I'm on my way to a runoff with one of our U.S. Senate candidates, John Ossoff, and
Right.
I'm happy to be on your show, man.
Oh man, we are very happy to have you here. This is your we give a little round of applause for you there. So Daniel, I'm just going to jump right into it, because there's everybody's eyes are on Georgia right now. Everybody's looking at Georgia right now. And of course we have the two big Senate runoff races, but the only other race I hear about a lot is yours. I have a lot of friends down there on the ground in Georgia, out there campaigning, and everybody's talking about Daniel Blackman and Georgia's 4th District and the Public Service Commissioner. So I'm hearing all this, and I never heard of this term or this position before, Public Service Commissioner. I had to Google search it myself. So to begin, can you explain to us, what is a Public Service Commissioner? What is it that you're going to be doing?
Yeah, so first of all, again, thank you, and to your listeners, I'm privileged to be the third race in Georgia on the January 5th runoff, and we're happy about that. In some states, it's called a Public Utility Commissioner, like California, but in Georgia, it's a Public Service Commissioner, and that just means that they're the ones that determine what you pay in your light bill. We all have utilities, so when you think of utilities in the United States, we get a bill in the mail and we pay it. But most people don't realize that there are commissioners that vote and that meet with utility companies that regulate that process. And I'm running to serve on this very powerful but little known position. And I'm privileged, man. I mean, these guys help to drive investment in broadband infrastructure and utility infrastructure and in the way in which we produce energy. So for those of your listeners that are climate activists or who believe in the science and want to fight back against what we're seeing, this is a position that's down ballot that directly impacts people's people's utility bills.
Wow, it sounds like a really important position. I mean, especially if it's dealing with utilities and all that stuff. And being that this job does deal with public utilities and environment and infrastructure and all those things, what kind of qualifications does one need to actually have in order to get this position? Like, are you qualified? I mean, not to say that you aren't qualified. I'm sure you're qualified, but what are the qualifications? You know, I mean, did you have to have an education in any of this? Because I don't know anything about being about utilities or infrastructure or anything like that.
The thing about it is, with the background you have to have is a keen understanding of policy, and you have to have an understanding of the rate-making process. This is not a position where somebody that just says, I'm a climate activist, I'm going to run for it. This is probably the best way to put it is if there was a court, like the Supreme Court or a state court, for the way that utility rates are made, this would be it. The way it works that a utility company says, here's the amount of money we need ratepayers to pay for us to be profitable and to keep everybody lights on. They have to make that argument in front of a commission. In Georgia, it's a 5-member commission. Oh. The utility companies bring all their evidence, their documentation, and they sit down. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of understanding of, for instance, we currently have a nuclear expansion in Georgia, which is a $30 billion project, $30 billion with a B. And we sit down and we determine is the number that the utility company has put in place, does that align with what we are charging ratepayers for the construction of this facility, right? I mean, that's the responsibility. They're the judiciary body of the utility industry, and that is the focus of it. I mean, it's one of those areas that can be increasingly complicated. Do you have to have an environmental science background? No. Do you have to have a background in utility regulation? No. But you do need to have a fundamental, basic understanding of public utilities and policymaking.
Absolutely, and that's something that you have.
Of course. I wouldn't be running for it if I didn't.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be as smart as I wasn't. I wouldn't have advised groups in D.C., organizations, the Congressional Black Caucus, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, the Congressional Black Caucus. I mean, I've done this work for the past 12 to 15 years. I was very fortunate to support the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, worked with the Department of Energy on minority contract and minority opportunities from a business contracting standpoint with the energy sector, worked with multiple EPA administrators, worked in my region, so I am beyond qualified and wouldn't be speaking to you if I wasn't.
Absolutely. It definitely sounds like it. Now, I just listened to you run through like a list of the things or a list of the people that you've worked with in the past. And when I kind of researched this role, it shows that in most states, this position is actually nonpartisan. I heard you say that you worked with, the Obama administration and things like that. What do you think being a Democrat, or how do you think being a Democrat actually plays a role in this position? Do you think partisanship actually matters in this position?
It matters to the voters, but it doesn't matter on paper. I mean, Democrats and Republicans have kilowatt hours, right? I mean, There's not a higher utility rate for Republicans and a lower one for Democrats. Georgians have the 5th highest electric rates in the United States and the 8th highest utility rates. Those are not Democratic or Republican utility rates, those are utility rates. In the United States right now, 23 Americans, not 23 Democrats or 23 million Republicans, 23 million Americans at the end of this year run the risk of eviction. 205 million Americans this year run the risk of utility disconnection. We're talking about just this year alone going into next year. And I want people to understand that the partisanship, the tribalism, the separation of political ideology have to stop. We're literally, destroying families and the lives of community members around this country because we're running for positions that have forced us into corners to make decisions that are not in our best interest but based on elephants and donkeys, and that's not me.
Right.
This race is partisan, so I'm a Democrat. My opponent is a Republican. But at the end of the day, this is about the people of Georgia having the 5th highest electric rates and the 8th highest utility rates. So it doesn't matter if it's partisan or not. It's about right versus wrong.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, speaking of your opponent, he's actually, I read a little bit on him. He's moved some things that I would say are somewhat progressive or environmentally friendly. But let me ask you, in what ways would you like to move Georgia forward in energy that actually differs from your opponent? It's Bubba McDonald, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, first of all, I'd like clarity on what you would consider progressive in moving in that direction, because I would disagree. I think there are a couple of things he's done from an environmental standpoint that are decent. But if we were talking about going from 0 to 100 in a decade,
right,
and it took you 10 years to move 3 spaces, I don't think that's progressive. I think progress is the best word for me to use for progress is acceleration, and our investment hasn't been accelerated the way I would like to. So I would push back against your question.
Right.
I'd clearly say the difference between he and I is that 85% of his money comes from utility companies he regulates. What I would say the difference between he and I is that he represents an industry that has expanded nuclear on the back of ratepayers, that has expanded cleanup of coal ash to the tune of $500 million onto the ratepayers. And I believe in my heart that there's a very direct answer I want to give you that says we have to stop accepting people that are doing a little bit to make sure that they stay credible, but the overall impact on our health, on our community, on our education, on our grandmothers and our grandfathers, I'm not willing to trade out a person's small steps for the big steps that we've gone in the wrong direction. So we have a lot of differences. He has served 22 years. He's represented the utility industry.
Daniel, you're kind of cutting out a little bit there with your phone. It's kind of coming in just a little choppy. Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Which part?
You said that you want to. I think you said something along the lines of that you want to make sure that the citizens of Georgia, especially in your district, when you wouldn't consider those small steps. And I think it was something along those lines. I'm sorry.
Well, what I said in a nutshell. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, what I said in a nutshell is that we have to stop allowing a person's small steps in one direction to, on paper, look like they've made progress. There are families right now, because their utilities are disconnected, we've pushed them back 6, 7, 8, 12 months. And we have to stop saying that because people give us crumbs off of the table that they've done enough in an elected position. Mm-hmm. That's why we keep getting more of the same. So when I push back on you, it's not an indictment against you as an individual. It's me saying that I truly believe when you say you've done progressive things or made progressive decisions, that they should be able to be measurable. And there's nothing measurable about the service of my opponent. Now, granted, has he done some good things for the environment? Yes. But if you want a pebble thrown in the water to give you a small ripple, then that's what you get. But if you want someone like myself that's going to throw a bigger rock into a pond that's going to cause a splash and let everybody get wet, and like that's what you get with my candidacy. Measurable progress and measurable change, and not just enough lip service and small actions that have pretty much propped you up. This is Donald Trump's co-chair who has supported every initiative and every opportunity that President Trump has put in place. And if I don't know about you, but if you research, like so many people around this country, just do the research. And the bottom line is the Trump administration has rolled back every environmental protection. The Department of Energy has failed to fight climate change.
Yes, they have.
And we're doing things in Georgia right now that.
You still there? Hello? Oh, no, I think we lost him. Hold on. Daniel, you still there? All right, we're going to try to get him back right now. Hold on real quick, everybody. Oops. Let's see here. Maybe I can all right, so we got Daniel back. Sorry about that, Daniel. These technology these days. But I completely understand what you're saying about how Donald Trump has rolled back a lot of environmental protections and things like that. I was more referring to how your opponent has, he's proposed things for like solar and wind energy and things like that, and renewable energy. And I don't know on what scale, but at least, like I said, that's what, or like you said, that's what it says on paper. But yes, you do make a lot of sense when it says, you'd rather see a big rock thrown into the pond where everybody gets the big splash versus the small ripple. So I completely understand that. Let me ask you this.
And that's the thing. Well, really quick, because I want to be very clear. The problem that I have when people, even when they do the right thing, is that our standard is so low. The bar is so low that we're just expecting people to just do enough to be able to get reelected. My problem is I have a 16-year-old child with asthma, and his asthma can directly be attributed to the air quality in the communities in which we've lived. And I'm just being very direct and frank. I don't blame my opponent for all the decisions or the impact of the fossil fuel industry. What my argument is we have to stop thinking that these small steps that are being taken can be measured as strong and the right progressive ideologies when we don't need small steps. We need giant leaps, right? When Kennedy decided to take us to the moon, it wasn't, we didn't go from Washington to Detroit. No, we went from Earth to the moon, and that's my perspective. I want to take bigger leaps so that we can get in a faster position towards a clean energy future.
Absolutely.
So sorry for the long answer, but I wanted to make sure we understood it.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Thanks for the clarification. Now, let me ask you this. You said you want to close what's called the technology gap in Georgia. What exactly does that mean? What is the technology gap? The technology
gap in the United States, not just in Georgia, is this. We have a society in which, developed areas, I'll use Georgia as an example. Metro Atlanta has done very well, but rural Georgia has been left behind. When you look at kids in rural Georgia right now that don't have access to high-speed internet, what do you think happens to those kids in 2 years of COVID that weren't able to learn? I'll tell you what happens because the Department of Education just released the numbers. While reading has been fairly stable, math and science scores amongst kids in rural parts of the country has dramatically dropped. So when I say I want to bridge that technology gap, it's the same example of what Michelle Obama said when I had a chance to work with the Let's Move campaign. She talked about food deserts, right? Food deserts are areas where you can find a McDonald's, a Wendy's, or a Burger King on every corner, but you can't find a farmer's market. You can't find clean and healthy vegetables and fruits. And I believe a technology desert can be defined and quantified in the same way. When I think of a technology desert, I think of rural parts of the state that don't have access to first responder services, areas that don't have access to hospitals, areas that don't have access to high-speed internet, where kids are forced to go into parking lots to sit down and do their homework for 3 and 4 hours at a time. So I believe we have to bridge that gap, because if we don't, we will contribute more to the problem than being a part of the solution.
Absolutely. Would it cost Georgians a lot to actually upgrade the energy infrastructure in that state or even in your district?
Everything costs a lot. Yes. Yeah. But we found money to bail out the auto industry. We found money to bail out Wall Street. We found money to bail out banks. We can't keep finding money for big business, and we can't find money to invest into infrastructure to make sure communities aren't left behind. So again, it's not an indictment against you. When those questions are asked to me, I just turn right back around, and the argument I have is, let's ask that question and let's put it into perspective. We just found $3 trillion for the bank, right?
Yeah.
Last time I checked for the stimulus package, that money was found, and less than $1 trillion of that was allocated to stimulus money that went directly to the American people. So at the end of the day, I don't take the argument that, it's going to cost a lot. Everything in the United States costs a lot of money. We just have to prioritize differently and make sure that the investments we're making go towards infrastructure and not towards waste.
Absolutely. So, Daniel, I got one last question for you here. How can people find out more about your campaign, and how can people get involved if they want to help, even if they don't live in the state of Georgia like myself?
Well, first of all, man, these conversations, and I want to thank you for you having the sense of really focusing on this issue.
Absolutely.
Because the bottom line is, you put me in a position where we're asking tough questions. When I push back on you, again, it's not an indictment. I just want people to understand I represent the kind of candidate because I have been with the people, man. I've seen too much people struggle and hurt and fight to just have a fair shot. And so I take these interviews very seriously, whether, you were, Vice on HBO or, you're just, this podcast that we're doing now. I don't take that for granted because whoever's listening to this needs to be encouraged and understand and be educated. So the way people can help us is they can volunteer. They can go to DanielForGeorgia.com. That's DANIELFOR and then GEORGIA.com. If you go to DanielForGeorgia.com, you can pull up our toolkit. You can volunteer. You can contribute financially. There's so many opportunities you can do. But more than anything else, if you live in Georgia, you can vote, and you can encourage 5, 10, 15, 20 of your friends to vote. And then if you don't live in Georgia, you can do emails. You can use your Twitter account, Instagram, Facebook, or any social media platform to let people know there is a third race in Georgia on January 5th for a position that can fight climate change, fight for poor people, and make sure that Georgia is in a position to invest into a future that's brighter for all of us and not a future that gives more profits to utilities than upward pressure and opportunity for its private citizens. So I'm honored, man. Thank you so much, and it means a lot for me to be able to speak to you.
Daniel, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for educating us on your position and how important it is. That's what the point of this show is, and I'm glad I learned about it. So thank you so much, Daniel. God bless you, and we are out here in Cali. We're definitely rooting for you, sir.
Thank you, brother, and thank you to California. No state has done everything right, but in California, my friend Peterson, who was the former director of sustainability. Thank you, California, for the things that you've done to show us in other parts of the country, how to make some hard decisions. And we're with you, whether it's the wildfires or it's the challenges you guys have faced. Georgia and the rest of the country is with you. We're thinking about you guys and continue to support us in Georgia.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Daniel. All right. Cheers to you. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Daniel Blackman. What a very educational conversation we had right there. Y'all make sure you check him out, DanielForGeorgia.com. All right, y'all, we will be back on the other side of this break. This is the Uninformed States of America podcast right here on the Young Angels Network.
You are listening to the Uninformed States of America podcast with your host, Mike Riley, here on the Young Angels Network. Follow us by going to YoungAngelsNetwork.org, MikeRileyNow.com, and the USAPodcast.com.